April rain drummed against the windows as I made my morning tea. Lakewood was always generous with rain, especially in the spring, when the lake seemed to choose to share its water with the sky. I watched the droplets collect on the glass and slowly drip down, forming whimsical patterns. How many such rainy mornings have I spent in this house? I can't count. My name is Merle Hadley, and in 3 days I will be 68 years old. For 40 years I taught math at Lakewood High School. For 40 years I explained to children the beauty of numbers and logic. Now I am retired, and my days are filled with a quietness that I used to appreciate so much, but now sometimes don't know where to get away from. My tea, always Earl Grey, no sugar, with a drop of milk, had long since gone cold, but I continued to sit by the window, watching the rain and going over my to-do list for the day. Groceries, cleaning, maybe the library, weather permitting. The usual chores of an ordinary Tuesday. But somewhere on the edge of my mind, the thought of my upcoming birthday was throbbing. Would I be celebrating it alone? Again? The ringing of the phone snapped me out of my musings. The number was unidentifiable, but I answered it anyway. At my age, every call could be important. Mrs. Hadley? It was an unfamiliar female voice. This is Patricia from Lakewood Glamour Beauty Salon. I'm confirming your appointment for tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. I didn't make an appointment at the salon. I was about to tell you that, but something stopped me. Why not? Maybe a little change was just what I needed before my birthday. Yeah, sure, I said. I'll be there tomorrow at 10. After the call, I went up to my bedroom and opened my closet. Most of the clothes were practical, discreet, the clothes of a math teacher used to restraint. In the far corner hung the blue dress Frank had given me for our last anniversary. To match the color of your eyes, he'd said then. I pulled the dress out and held it up to me, looking in the mirror. The wrinkles around my eyes had gotten deeper. My hair had gone completely gray, but my eyes, yes, they were still the same deep blue color. Frank had died 10 years ago. A heart attack suddenly. We were making plans for the summer, and the next day I woke up a widow. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, sometimes it feels like another life. Our house held memories of him in every corner. Frank was a civil engineer, his hands creating, building, fixing. The shelves he'd crafted, the table he'd restored, the garden bench, his latest project. Sometimes I talked to him, especially when the loneliness became unbearable. Do you think, Frank? I asked aloud, returning the dress to the closet. They're coming to my birthday party? They are my son Garth, his wife Tabitha, and their children, my grandchildren, 16-year-old Octavia and 12-year-old Fletcher. Garth is now 42. We haven't seen each other in 3 months, not since Christmas, when I asked to join them for a holiday dinner. It had been an awkward evening of strained smiles and forced politeness. Tabitha barely concealed her irritation. Garth was aloof, and the grandchildren were staring at their phones, occasionally looking up to answer my question with a one-word yes or no. When Garth was little, we were very close. I helped him with his homework, cheered him on at soccer games, and read him books before bed. Frank was sometimes jokingly jealous. Of course you love him more. He's a carbon copy of me. In high school, the trouble began. Garth got involved with a bad crowd, his grades dropped, he got cocky. Frank and I worried, but we coped by channeling his energy. College changed Garth. He matured, became more responsible. He got a degree in finance, got a good job. We were proud of him. And then there was Tabitha. Beautiful, ambitious, driven. They met at work at Lakewood Insurance. The wedding was lavish with 200 guests, many of whom I had seen for the first time. Even then, Tabitha made it clear that Garth's family was now her, not his parents. After Frank died, our relationship with our son became even more strained. Garth came to the funeral, helped with the arrangements, was there for the first few weeks. And then, he went back to his life. I don't blame him. He's got a family, a job. But something changed. It's like the bridge that connected us has disappeared. Now our communication is reduced to rare phone calls and even rarer visits. Last year on my birthday, they didn't even call. Tabitha sent a text saying, "Happy birthday, Merle. Garth is in a meeting. Kids are at practice. Weekend will be busy. Call you soon." We never called. The rain intensified, and I decided to postpone going to the store. Instead, I started cleaning. I scrubbed every surface, vacuumed the carpets, washed the windows. The work helped me not to think. About what? About the fact that my life had narrowed down to this house, that my only son seemed to prefer I didn't exist, about my grandchildren growing up barely knowing me. Finished cleaning up, I pulled out the photo albums. Years captured on paper. Here's Garth taking his first steps. Here's his graduation. Here's our last family trip to the lake when Frank was still alive. I tried to find the moment when it all went wrong, but I couldn't. Perhaps it happened gradually, day by day, unbeknownst to me. The doorbell rang, taking me by surprise. I wasn't expecting visitors. On the doorstep stood Dorothy, my neighbor, and one of the few true friends I had left. She was holding a container of something flavorful. "I figured you wouldn't want to cook in this weather," she said, handing me the container. "Chicken noodle soup, my grandmother's recipe." Dorothy is 72, but unlike me, she enjoys her position as a venerable old lady, as she calls herself. A widow like me, but with 3 children and 7 grandchildren who visit her regularly. "Come in," I invited, stepping aside. I was just about to have tea. We made ourselves comfortable in the kitchen. Dorothy poured the tea and I took out the cookies I'd baked yesterday. "Have you decided how you're going to celebrate your birthday?" she asked, as if reading my mind. "Hopefully with my family," I said. "All I have to do is convince them to come." Dorothy snorted. "You know, you let them get away with too much. If I were you, I'd have spoken my mind a long time ago." "And you'd be all alone?" I sighed. "No, Dorothy, they're all I have." "You have you, Merle, and that's a lot," she squeezed my hand. "Remember that." After Dorothy left, I stood at the window for a long time, watching her cross the street, shielding herself from the rain with an umbrella. Dorothy was right. I'd let Garth and Tabitha get away with too much. Perhaps that was my mistake. I never demanded respect, never insisted on my place in their lives. I just waited, hoping they would remember me. Determined to act, I picked up my phone and dialed my son's number. Garth didn't answer, and I was about to hang up when I heard his voice. "Mom? Is something wrong?" His tone sounded impatient, as if my call was an inappropriate intrusion into his day. It's nothing, Garth," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I just wanted to remind you that Friday is my birthday. I thought maybe you and Tabitha and the kids could stop by." There was a pause, during which I could hear muffled voices. Apparently, Garth was consulting with Tabitha. "Look, Mom," he finally answered, "we have a lot to do on Friday. Tabitha has to be at the presentation of a new insurance product. Octavia has a rehearsal for the school play, and Fletcher—" "I understand," I interrupted, not wanting to hear another list of reasons why they couldn't spare me the time. "It's no big deal. Maybe on the weekend." Again the pause. Again the muffled voices. "Actually," Garth's voice suddenly became more determined, "we could stop by your place on Friday for a couple hours. Say around 2? I couldn't find the words right away out of surprise. "Really? That's wonderful, Garth. I'm so excited. Maybe I'll make something special. What is Fletcher like? Is Octavia still a vegetarian?" "Mom," he interrupted me, and I heard a familiar note of irritation in his voice. "It doesn't have to be anything special. We'll just stop by to congratulate you, give you a gift, and move on. We really have a lot to do on this day." "Of course I understand," I agreed quickly, not wanting to scare away this rare opportunity to see them all. "Anytime that's convenient for you." "Okay." His voice softened just a little. "We'll be there around 2. After the conversation, I couldn't sit still with excitement. The family is coming for my birthday. For the first time in years, we'll get together not because of an obligation, not because of Christmas or Thanksgiving, but just to celebrate my day." Despite Garth's words, I decided to make a treat. Nothing fancy like he'd asked, but enough to show them how happy I was to see them. Eggplant lasagna, Garth's favorite dish since childhood, chocolate pecan cake that he always asked for on his birthday, a veggie salad for Octavia, though I wasn't sure if she was still on that diet, homemade chocolate chip cookies that Fletcher adored as a kid. The next few days passed in preparations. I visited a beauty salon for a haircut and soft coloring that accentuated my natural gray hair. "You look younger," the hairdresser said, and I let myself believe her. Bought a new blouse, sky blue, to match my eyes, as Frank would say. Tidied up the house, though it was clean enough as it was. Dorothy came by to help with the cleaning and cooking, though I assured her I could do it myself. Let an old friend do her part, she said, wielding the rag vigorously. Besides, I'm curious to see your ungrateful son and his bitch of a wife. Dorothy! I tried to sound stern, but I couldn't help smiling. They're not so bad. Of course, and I'm not an old gossip, she snorted. Merle, dear, you're too kind to them. I always have been. The day I was born, I woke up early before dawn. The sun was just beginning to break through the clouds, promising a clear day after a week of rain. I took that as a good sign. After taking a shower, I put on a new blouse and navy blue pants. I applied light makeup just a little, just to emphasize my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I felt beautiful? No, that's not the word. I felt visible, alive. By noon, everything was ready. Lasagna in the oven, cake on the table, salad in a large glass bowl, cookies on a plate. I arranged the plates and utensils. Not too formal, but pretty. In the center of the table is a small vase with the first spring flowers from my garden. At the beginning of the second, I started to get nervous. What if they don't show up? What if Garth called at the last minute and said they had a change of plans? I was getting ready to be disappointed when I heard the sound of a car pulling up. They're here, my family, for my birthday. At exactly 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I took one last look in the mirror, a new sky blue blouse, a neat haircut, light makeup. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. Happy birthday, Mom. Garth hugged me awkwardly, barely touching my shoulders as if he was afraid of getting dirty. He smelled like expensive cologne and business meetings. Hello, Merle. Tabitha nodded, making no attempt to hug me. Her thin lips stretched into a smile that didn't affect her eyes. She wore an immaculate gray suit and pearl earrings, the uniform of a successful businesswoman. The grandchildren stood behind their parents. Octavia, my 16-year-old granddaughter, kept her eyes on the phone, casting only a fleeting glance in my direction. Her dyed dark hair fell over her face, hiding the expression in her eyes. Fletcher was 12, a lanky teenager with pimples on his forehead and a disgruntled expression. Come in, I'm so happy to see you. I stepped aside, letting them into the house. Octavia, Fletcher, how you've grown. Octavia mumbled something without looking up from the screen, and Fletcher just shrugged as he walked past me. I felt a pang of disappointment, but I tried not to let it show. Something smells good, Garth said, sniffing. I told you I didn't have to cook anything. It's just lasagna, I said, leading them into the living room. Your favorite with eggplant and chocolate cake. Nothing fancy. Tabitha took a critical look at my living room, a little old-fashioned, with framed photos, bookshelves, and cozy armchairs. You never decided to renovate. It wasn't a question, but a statement. Garth and I could help you with a designer. It all looks so outdated. I like my house the way it is. I tried to keep my voice light and casual. There are so many memories in it. That's why you have to change everything, Tabitha murmured, but I pretended not to hear. We sat in the living room, Garth and Tabitha on the couch, the kids in the chairs, me in the chair I'd brought from the kitchen. The conversation didn't flow. I asked about work, about school, about plans for the summer, getting one-word answers or evasive phrases. Shall we come to the table? I suggested when the pause lengthened. The lasagna should be ready just about now. At the table, the atmosphere improved a little. Garth praised the lasagna. Octavia reluctantly admitted that the salad was not bad, and Fletcher even took a refill, albeit silently. Only Tabitha barely touched her food, saying she was watching her figure. How's school going, Octavia? I asked, trying to make conversation. Did your father tell me you were in the school play? Octavia took her eyes off the phone and looked at me like I was a talking piece of furniture. Yes, I'm playing Juliet, she answered without enthusiasm. The premiere is in 2 weeks. Juliet, how wonderful! I was genuinely excited. I'd love to see it. Maybe you could take me with you? Octavia gave her mother a panicked look and Tabitha intervened. I'm afraid that's not possible, Merle. We only have 4 tickets. For us and for my parents. You know how close Octavia is to Grandma Eleanor. Of course, I nodded, feeling the color flood my face. I understand. Turning to Fletcher, I tried again. And how's your soccer, Fletcher? Are you still playing? Not anymore, he answered, not looking up from his plate. I'm swimming now. You are? I didn't know. That's wonderful. Your grandfather Frank was a great swimmer when he was young. Fletcher got a scholarship to a summer sports camp, Garth interjected with pride in his voice. Coach says he has a lot of potential. That's wonderful, I smiled at my grandson. I'd love to see you compete. Fletcher shrugged, not looking up. Next season, maybe? Garth replied uncertainly. Next season. Always in the future, never now. I felt the hope with which I had waited for this day slowly fade. Who wants cake? I asked, getting up from the table. Chocolate with nuts. We're on a diet, Tabitha said quickly, putting her hand on Octavia's shoulder. And Fletcher needs to watch his weight because of swimming. I could eat a piece, Fletcher said suddenly, and got a disapproving look from his mother. Just a small one, Tabitha gave in. And then an extra workout. While I sliced the cake, Garth took me aside. Mom, we can't stay long, he said, lowering his voice. Tabitha has a meeting at 5 and we still have to get the kids home and change. I felt my heart clench. They'd been at my place for less than an hour. Of course I understand, I said, trying to hide my disappointment. I really appreciate you taking the time to stop by. When we returned to the table, Tabitha was already packing her purse, clearly getting ready to leave. Octavia wasn't looking up from her phone, and Fletcher was picking at his cake with a fork. We should go, Garth announced, clapping his hands together. But first, a present! Tabitha pulled from her bag a neatly wrapped medium-sized box tied with a ribbon. Happy birthday, Merle, she said with the same cold smile. We picked it out as a family. I accepted the box, feeling a slight thrill. A gift is always an act of consideration, regardless of the contents. Maybe they cared about me, but they just didn't know how to show it. Open it, Garth said hurriedly, and I noticed a strange glint in his eyes. I carefully untied the ribbon and removed the lid. Inside was empty. A completely empty box without a single thing in it. I raised a perplexed look at my son, waiting for an explanation, thinking it was some kind of joke or that the real gift was somewhere else. And then they laughed. All 4 of them. Loudly, unrestrainedly, with a kind of cruel pleasure. You're just as empty! Garth laughed through his laughter. An empty box for an empty woman. A perfect match, Tabitha said, wiping away her tears. Octavia was filming my face on her phone, and Fletcher was giggling, repeating, "Pacifier, pacifier!" I froze, holding the empty box, unable to believe what was happening. My family, my son, my grandchildren, had they come here on purpose to make fun of me? To humiliate me on my own birthday? Garth! My voice sounded strange, as if from far away. What does that mean? Oh, Mom, don't make that face. He was still laughing. It's just a joke. You were always so serious. A joke? I felt something inside of me break, and at the same time something else, hard and cold, rose up to take its place. You came to my birthday party to give me an empty box and call me a pacifier? Is this a joke? Don't be dramatic, Merle, Tabitha interjected, still smiling. It's just family humor. Family humor? My hand squeezed the box so hard the cardboard crumpled. We have different understandings of the word family, Tabitha. Garth stopped laughing when he saw something in my face. Mom, don't take it so personally. We just wanted to have a little fun. On me. I didn't ask, I said. Come on, Grandma, Octavia said, still holding the phone at the ready. Don't be such a drag. I rose slowly from the table, still holding the crumpled box. I think you really should go, I said quietly but firmly. You have an important meeting at 5, Tabitha. I don't want to be late. They looked at each other, clearly not expecting that reaction. Maybe they thought I'd cry, beg them to stay, or just swallow my resentment like I'd done all these years. Mom, don't be offended. Garth tried to take my hand, but I pulled away. It was just a stupid joke. Yes, a very stupid joke, I agreed, looking him straight in the eye. And very revealing. Thank you for taking the time to stop by. I won't keep you. I walked them to the door with a stony expression on my face. No tears, no recriminations, just cold politeness. They were obviously discouraged. They were expecting drama, hysteria, pleading, but not this quiet, icy dignity. We'll call you this weekend, Garth said uncertainly, standing on the doorstep. Don't bother, I said, closing the door. I stood in the hallway, listening to their car start and drive away. Only when the sound of the engine finally died down did I let myself sit upright on the floor, leaning my back against the door. The empty box was still in my hands. A pacifier. They think of me as a pacifier. An old, unnecessary, contentless woman. 40 years of teaching, the thousands of students I've taught, the home I've created, the son I've raised, none of it means anything to them. I am nothing. The tears finally broke through, and I sobbed sitting on the floor of my empty house on my 68th birthday, holding an empty box. A perfect coincidence, as Tabitha said. I don't know how long I sat like that. Maybe minutes, maybe hours. When the tears finally dried up, I stood up, feeling the pain in my knees and back. Old age isn't just wrinkles and gray hair. It's also pain in my joints after sitting on the floor. I walked into the kitchen and mechanically began clearing the table. Uneaten lasagna, almost untouched cake, dirty plates, evidence of my humiliation. I threw away the food, washed the dishes, wiped the table. The movements helped me not to think, not to feel. When there was no trace of the feast left in the kitchen, I went up to my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. The mirror across the hall reflected an older woman with tear-stained eyes, wearing a sky blue blouse I'd bought especially for a family reunion. A pacifier. The word rang in my head, echoing, pacifier, pacifier, pacifier. Number, I'm not a pacifier, I'm Merle Hadley and I deserve better. Something changed inside of me. The hurt and resentment didn't go away, but there was something else. Anger. A quiet, cold anger, not like a flash of rage. It was a conscious decision not to let them treat me like this anymore. I pulled my day planner out of my nightstand and found a number I hadn't dialed in years. Robert Fisher, the lawyer who'd handled Frank's cases after his death. My lawyer. It was almost 7 in the evening and I wasn't sure he'd answer. But after the third ring, I heard his voice. Robert Fisher speaking. Hello, Robert. This is Merle Hadley, Frank Hadley's widow. We haven't spoken in years, but I need your help. It concerns my will and some other legal matters. Mrs. Hadley? I could hear the surprise in his voice. Of course I remember you. What can I do for you? I need to see you as soon as possible. Tomorrow, perhaps? Tomorrow. He seemed to be checking his calendar. Yes, I can see you at 10 in the morning. Is it urgent? Yes, I answered, looking at the crumpled empty box I still held in my hand. It's very urgent. I want to change my will. And one more thing. Very well, Mrs. Hadley. I'll expect you tomorrow at 10 o'clock. I hung up the phone and took a deep breath. Something had ended today, but something had also begun. I would no longer be a blank slate to be ignored, to be laughed at. They think I'm empty, worthless? Well, I'll show them how wrong they are. I tossed the crumpled box into the trash, took off my birthday blouse, and put on my house robe. This birthday was the last one I would spend waiting for their attention and love. I wouldn't wait any longer. Robert Fisher's office was located in downtown Lakewood, in an old red brick building. I walked up the steps, leaning on my cane. My knees hurt more than usual after sitting on the floor yesterday. On the glass door in gold letters it read, Fisher and Associates, Legal Services. The receptionist, a young woman with a neat bundle on her head, greeted me with a smile. Good morning. What can I do for you? I'm Merle Hadley. I have an appointment with Mr. Fisher at 10 o'clock. She checked her computer and nodded. Yes, Mr. Fisher is expecting you. Please come in. Robert Fisher hadn't changed much in the 7 years since we'd seen each other, still as trim, with his gray beard neatly trimmed. Only the wrinkles around his eyes had deepened, and he had changed his glasses for more modern ones. Mrs. Hadley. He rose to meet me and shook my hand. I'm glad to see you, though I'm surprised to hear from you. Please sit down. I sank into the leather chair across from his desk and put my bag on my lap. Thank you for agreeing to meet on such short notice, Robert. This really is an urgent matter. You mentioned you wanted to change the will? Yes, and more. I unzipped my bag and pulled out a folder of documents. I need your professional opinion on a few things. I'm listening to you carefully. I took a deep breath. Do you remember that when Frank died 10 years ago, he left me all of his property? Fisher nodded. Of course, Mr. Hadley was a very wealthy man. In addition to your house and personal savings, there were shares in several companies, an investment portfolio, and a piece of land by the lake. That's right. And you and I decided at the time not to disclose the full extent of the inheritance to Garth. He only knew about the house and a small bank account. That was your decision, Fisher reminded me. You said you didn't want the money to ruin your son, that you wanted to see him succeed on his own. I nodded, sinking into my memories. Garth had been 32 when Frank died. He was already working for an insurance company, married to Tabitha. Octavia was 6, and Fletcher was a toddler 2 years old. Garth came to the funeral, helped with the arrangements, and supported me for the first while. It was then that I made the decision not to tell him the full extent of the inheritance. I remembered a conversation we'd had a week after the funeral. Garth had stopped by to discuss financial matters. "Mom, I've been thinking about your future," he said, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. "It's going to be hard for you to keep the house on your own. Maybe you should sell it and move into a smaller apartment, or—" He hesitated. "You could come live with us. We have a guest room." I knew that offer didn't come easily to him. The guest room in their house was tiny, and Tabitha was already planning to turn it into an office. "Thank you, son, but I can manage," I said then. "I have savings, and the house is already fully paid off. Besides, my pension should be enough for a modest living." "Are you sure?" I could hear the relief in his voice. "If anything, you can always count on us." "I know," I smiled, "and I appreciate it." And I didn't tell him that in addition to the house, Frank had left me nearly $2 million worth of stock, a $500,000 investment portfolio, and a piece of lakefront land that was growing in value every year. I decided to let Garth stand on his own 2 feet, to succeed by his own labor, and then, when the time came, all this would be his legacy. "Mrs. Hadley?" Fisher's voice brought me back to the present. "Do you want to disclose the inheritance to your son now?" "No," I shook my head. "Quite the opposite. I want to change the will." I told him about yesterday's incident, the empty box, the words, the laughter. With every word of my story, the lawyer's face grew more and more somber. "This is outrageous," he said when I finished. "Your son and his family have behaved unacceptably." "Yesterday wasn't the first incident," I admitted. "Just the last straw. It had started much earlier." And I went back into my memories. When Garth was a baby, Frank and I had doted on him. An only child, long awaited, beloved. Frank taught him how to play baseball. I helped him with his lessons. We both worked, Frank at the construction company, me at school, but we always made time for our son. In his teens, the trouble started. Garth got mixed up with bad company, got cocky, skipped school. I remember the day the principal called Frank and me in and told us that Garth had been smoking marijuana in the schoolyard. "We could expel him," the principal said. "But given your reputation, Mrs. Hadley, I'm willing to give him another chance." I taught at the same school and felt humiliated. But for Garth's sake, I swallowed my pride and agreed to a trial period. At home, we had a serious conversation. "How could you do that?" Frank rarely raised his voice, but that day he yelled, "Do you realize that you've let not only yourself down, but your mother as well?" Garth sat with his head down. "I didn't mean to. It's just that everyone was doing it and you decided to be like everyone else?" Frank shook his head. "I thought we raised you better than that." Then I stepped in between them. "It's not what happened that matters. It's what happens next. Garth, you've been given a second chance. Don't blow it." After that incident, I spent more time with my son. I helped him with his homework, enrolled him in sports to keep him away from bad company. Frank worked late, often on weekends. We were expanding the house and needed extra money. I did all the heavy lifting. Little by little, Garth got better. He graduated from high school with good grades, went to college to study finance. Frank and I paid his tuition, though we could have used the money for ourselves, maybe to travel, which Frank had always dreamed of. At graduation, Garth hugged me and said, "Thanks, Mom. I couldn't have done it without you. I was happy." My son had become a good man, educated, with a successful future ahead of him. The trouble started when he met Tabitha. They worked at the same company, and she immediately made it clear that Garth's family was now her, not his parents. At first, it was little things: forgotten invitations to family dinners, last-minute canceled visits. Then it was outright dislike. I remember at Fletcher's christening, Tabitha introduced her parents as grandparents, and Frank and I as Garth's parents. It hurt, but I kept silent, not wanting to mar the celebration. Frank was taking his son's estrangement more easily. "Let him go, Merle," he said. "He has his own life, his own family, it's natural." But it wasn't natural for me. I gave Garth everything, my time, my love, my strength. And in return, I got less and less attention. After Frank died, things only got worse. Garth's visits became even less frequent, his phone calls shorter. Tabitha no longer hid her impatience when I showed up at their house. The grandchildren, following in their parents' footsteps, became more and more estranged. There were good moments, the birthdays we celebrated together, the rare family dinners when it seemed like everything could still be fixed. But with each passing year, those moments became fewer and fewer. And then there were years of humiliation, forgotten holidays, canceled appointments, dismissive comments. "Mom, do you have to wear those old-fashioned clothes? Grandma, you're so boring. Merle, maybe you shouldn't come to the school concert. There'll be important people there." And there's the empty box. "You're just as empty." "Mrs. Hadley?" Fisher's voice brought me back to reality. "So what exactly do you want to change in the will?" I straightened up in my chair. "I want to disinherit Garth, completely." Fisher raised his eyebrows. "That's a big decision. Are you sure?" "Absolutely. I don't want him or his family to get 1 cent of Frank's money anymore. They don't deserve it. So who do you want to leave your estate to?" I pulled another document out of my bag. "Here's a list of charitable organizations: Lakewood Teachers Foundation, the City Library, the animal shelter where I take in cats for foster care. And also I want to establish the Frank Hadley Memorial Scholarship for engineering students." Fisher scrutinized the list, then looked up at me. "Legally, all of this is possible. You have every right to dispose of your property as you see fit. But let me give you some advice as a human being, not as a lawyer. Don't make such decisions in haste. Perhaps in a few days, when the pain of what happened has subsided a little, you will change your mind." I shook my head. "I'm not going to change my mind, Robert. This is not an impulsive decision. It's the result of years of neglect and disrespect. Yesterday's incident was just the last straw." "Good." He nodded. "In that case, I'll prepare a new will. But there's one more thing. Your son can contest it after your death, claiming that you weren't in your right mind. What do you suggest?" "I would recommend including a clause in the document stating that anyone who tries to contest the will is automatically disqualified from any inheritance, even if the court takes their side. It would also be a good idea to have an independent medical examination to confirm your capacity." "We'll do everything necessary," I agreed. "There is one more question," Fisher continued. "You mentioned that you want to change more than just the will. What else?" I took a deep breath. "The lakefront property. I want to sell it. It was Frank's favorite piece of property. He bought it the year before he died, dreaming of building a summer house for his grandchildren. We often discussed plans to spend summer weekends there, fishing, swimming in the lake. After his death, I did not dare to do anything with the plot, keeping it as my husband's last dream." "Sell it?" Fisher was surprised. "But you always said you were saving it for your grandchildren." "Times have changed, Robert. My grandchildren have changed too. Or rather, they've been brought up so that they don't care about their old grandmother and her gifts. I'd rather use that money in other ways." "May I ask how?" "I want to buy a new house, in another city. Maybe even another state. Start a new life." Fisher leaned back in his chair, studying me with his gaze. "You've really thought this through, haven't you?" "Yes," I nodded. "I stayed up all night last night thinking about it, and I realized I'd had enough of being a victim. It's time to act." "Well," he started making notes in his notebook, "I'll get started on a new will right away. As for selling the property, that will take time. We'll need to assess its current value, find a buyer. But given the location, I don't think it'll be a problem. Lakeside land is always a bargain. How long will it take? Probate, a few days. Selling the property, maybe a few weeks or even months if we want to get a good price. What if we don't wait for a better price? If we need to sell quickly?" Fisher thought, "In that case, it might be possible to do it in 2 or 3 weeks. I have a few clients who might be interested, but the price will be below market value." "That's fine with me," I nodded. "The sooner the better. When the formalities had been discussed and I was about to leave, Fisher asked another question. Mrs. Hadley, do you plan to tell your son about your decision? I stopped in the doorway. Yes, Robert. But not right now. I want everything ready. The new will, the sold property, the money in the account. And then I'll have a little surprise for my family. On the way home, I stopped by Dorothy's. I needed my friend's advice and maybe her help. Dorothy opened the door, dressed in a brightly colored robe with a face mask. Merle! She exclaimed. I wasn't expecting you today. Come on in, but don't make fun of my appearance. It's beauty day. We made ourselves comfortable in the kitchen. Dorothy took off her mask, made some tea, and took out some cookies. Tell me, she demanded. From the look on your face, I could tell something was wrong. I told her about last night's humiliation, the empty box, and the cruel words. Then I told her about my visit to the lawyer and my plans. Good for you, Dorothy said when I was done. I should have put them in their place a long time ago. But are you sure about the will? After all, it's your son, your grandchildren. I'm sure, I said firmly. They don't deserve a dime. Let the money go to the people who really need it. And the new house? Are you serious about leaving Lakewood? I'm dead serious. There are too many memories here, good and bad. I need a fresh start. Dorothy stirred her tea thoughtfully. You know, my sister lives in Santa Barbara. It's a beautiful city, warm climate, ocean. She's been asking me to move there for a long time. Maybe we should both consider it. I looked at my friend in surprise. You want to go with me? Why not? Dorothy shrugged. My children are all over the country. My grandchildren come once a year for Christmas. At my age, it's time to think about warm climates and new experiences. Besides, she smiled slyly, I don't want to miss the show you're putting on for your ungrateful son. I laughed for the first time in 2 days. It'll be an unforgettable show, I promise. We spent the afternoon discussing plans. Dorothy suggested a dinner party, inviting Garth and his family over, ostensibly to reconcile and then announcing the news. You should see their faces when you tell them you sold the lot and rewrote the will, she said, rubbing her hands together. Oh, I'd pay for a ticket to that show. You'll get a front row ticket, I promised. Just give me time to get everything ready. When I got home that evening, I sat in Frank's office for a long time, going through old papers. There were our family photos, documents, letters, the story of a lifetime. What would you say, Frank? I asked aloud, looking at his picture. Would you approve of my decision? Frank had always been kinder than me, more tolerant. Perhaps he would have advised me to forgive, to give it another chance. But I knew there were times when I had to think about myself. And that moment came. I started making a list. What to take with me into my new life, what to keep, what to give to friends. It was a strange but liberating feeling, like I was shedding the weight of the past, preparing to leap into the unknown. A plan for revenge began to take shape in my head. I would give Garth and his family what they deserved, nothing, an empty box, and that would be my best revenge. It's been 3 weeks since my birthday. 3 weeks filled with meetings with attorneys, appraisers, realtors, and bankers. 3 weeks during which I hadn't returned Garth's infrequent calls, and he'd only called twice, both times briefly and without much enthusiasm. The lakeside lot had sold surprisingly quickly. The company planning to build a luxury cottage village there had been eyeing the land for a long time and had offered a good price. The money was already in my account, waiting for its time. A new will was drawn up, signed, and certified. I underwent an independent medical examination, which confirmed my full capacity. Under the new orders, all of my assets, house, bank accounts, stocks, and investments, were to be transferred to specified charitable organizations upon my death. Garth and his family received nothing. I had already found a new home, a small but cozy cottage in Santa Barbara, just 2 blocks from Sister Dorothy's house. The offer to buy was accepted. All that was left was to sign the papers and wire the money. Everything was ready for the final act of my little drama. Friday night, I called Garth. He didn't answer right away, and when he finally picked up, I could hear the surprise in his voice. Mom, is something wrong? Hello, Garth. I tried to keep my voice normal without a hint of the tension I was feeling. Nothing's wrong. I just wanted to invite you all to dinner on Sunday. There was a pause. I imagined him glancing over to Tabitha, silently asking her opinion. Sunday? He finally said it. I don't know, Mom. We've got a lot to do and the kids. It's important, Garth. I let a little vulnerability seep into my voice. I want to apologize for my behavior on my birthday. I reacted inappropriately to your joke, and I have some news I'd like to discuss with you in person. Another pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. He was trying to decide whether to waste a Sunday night with his old mother. Okay, he finally said. We'll come over. 6 o'clock, okay? 6 will be fine. I'll make dinner. Don't bother, Mom. We'll eat before. I insist, I said firmly. It's going to be a special dinner. After the conversation, I called Dorothy, who rushed over immediately, excited about what was to come. Do you think I should wear the black dress? She asked, going through the contents of my closet. Like at a funeral. After all, it would be the funeral of their hopes for an inheritance. I couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. Black would be too dramatic. Wear something casual. I don't want them to suspect anything until the last moment. You're right, Dorothy agreed, putting the black dress aside. The element of surprise is everything. We spent Saturday getting ready for dinner. I wanted it to be perfect, not to please Garth and his family, but for me. This was to be my triumph, my last performance on the stage of their lives. By 6 o'clock on Sunday evening, everything was ready. The table was set with a white tablecloth with the finest china Frank and I had received as a silver wedding present. In the center is a vase of fresh flowers, turkey in the oven, mashed potatoes, salads, homemade bread, apple pie, everything Garth loved as a kid. The last dinner I ever cooked for them. Dorothy arrived at 5, dressed in a simple beige dress, but with bright makeup and a new hairdo. You look gorgeous, I said, hugging my friend. I would have bought a new dress for such an event, she replied with a twinkle in her eye. It's not every day you see justice done. The doorbell rang at 6 sharp. I took a deep breath, adjusted the collar of my blouse, and went to open it. Garth, Tabitha, and the kids were standing on the doorstep, all dressed too well for a casual family dinner. I guess my words about important conversations had made them take the visit more seriously than usual. Come in, I smiled, stepping aside. I'm so glad you could make it. Garth hugged me awkwardly, Tabitha nodded, and the children mumbled inarticulate greetings. When they entered the living room, they saw Dorothy and visibly tensed. Dorothy! Garth raised his eyebrows. I didn't realize we'd have other guests. Dorothy is my closest friend, I replied, and she's here at my request. Please have a seat. Dinner is almost ready. We sat down at the table. The conversation didn't flow, despite my attempts to create a relaxed atmosphere. I asked about work, school, plans for the summer, only to receive one-word phrases or smiles. They were clearly waiting for me to get to the point, my apologies and big news. After the main course, before dessert, I decided the moment had arrived. Garth, Tabitha, I began, blotting my lips with a napkin. I invited you here today because I really wanted to apologize. Tabitha visibly relaxed, an indulgent smile appearing on her face. Garth nodded as if to say, well, finally. I have to apologize for letting you treat me disrespectfully all these years, I continued, looking them in the eye. For not putting you in your place when you first showed ingratitude. For putting up with your disrespect for so long. It's my fault, and I admit it. Tabitha's smile froze and Garth frowned. Mom, what are you talking about? If this is about the box, it was just a joke. We thought you'd understand. Oh, I understood, I nodded. I understood a lot more than you think. I realized that I mean nothing to you. I'm nothing in your eyes. And you know what? I've made my peace with that. But there's something else you need to know. I got up from the table and walked over to the secretary where I pulled out a file folder. Garth, did you know that when your father died 10 years ago, he left me all of his property? Yes, of course, Garth nodded. The house and some savings. Not only that, I shook my head. Your father was a very successful man, Garth. In addition to the house, he left me nearly $2 million worth of stocks, a $500,000 investment portfolio, and a piece of land by the lake. All this time, I've kept the full extent of my inheritance from you. Do you know why? Garth stared at me wide-eyed, clearly shocked by the information. Tabitha stepped forward, her face eager with interest. I wanted you to succeed on your own, I continued. And I plan to pass it all on to you and your children in time. All this time I've been living modestly, saving, even though I could have afforded so much more. Because I thought it was right to preserve my inheritance for the next generation. Mom, Garth started, but I raised my hand to stop him. Please let me finish. After your gift to me on my birthday, I thought long and hard, and I made a decision. I sold the lakefront property. What? Garth shrieked, jumping up from his chair. You had no right. My father bought it for his grandchildren. I had every right, I replied calmly. The plot of land was registered to me, and I got a very good price for it. $1,200,000. Oh my God, Garth groaned, clutching his head. Where did that money go? I donated half of it to the Lakewood Teachers Fund and the city library. Part of it went to the Frank Hadley Scholarship for engineering students. And with the rest of the money, I bought a new house in Santa Barbara, where I'm moving next month, with Dorothy. I nodded toward my friend, who was watching the scene with ill-concealed amusement. There was silence in the room. Tabitha sat pale, her mouth open. Garth looked as if he'd been punched in the throat. Octavia looked away from the phone for the first time all evening and stared at me in disbelief. Only Fletcher seemed more puzzled than shocked. But that's not all, I continued, pulling another document out of the folder. I've also changed my will. According to the new version, all of my assets, the house, bank accounts, stocks, and investments, will go to these charitable organizations upon my death. You will receive nothing. You can't do that! Tabitha shrieked, jumping up from her chair. It's unfair. Unfair? I raised an eyebrow. Was it fair to ignore me for years? Was it fair to make fun of an elderly woman on her birthday? Was it fair to raise your children to disrespect their grandmother? We never, Garth started, but I interrupted him. Don't lie, Garth. Not to yourself, not to me. You've been doing this for years. Little humiliations, disparaging comments, canceled meetings. You've made me realize I'm nothing in your eyes. Now I'm letting you know you're nothing in my will. Garth changed tactics. Mom, listen. His voice became soft, ingratiating. We've really behaved wrongly. That joke with the box was stupid and cruel. We've realized that. We want to make amends, to be closer to you. Give us a chance. It's too late, Garth. I shook my head. I've given you thousands of chances over the years. You blew them all. This is all because of you! Tabitha suddenly turned to her husband, her face contorted with anger. Your stupid idea with the box. I told you it was too much. My idea? Garth was outraged. You were the first to say you didn't want to spend on a gift, but I wasn't the one who came up with that stupid joke. Tabitha was already yelling. $2 million! $2 million! And you blew it! Don't you dare blame me! Garth was yelling too. You're the one who always turned the kids against Grandma! You're the one who always found reasons not to visit her! They continued shouting at each other, oblivious to my presence. Their real faces, their true natures showed in all their glory. Petty, greedy, selfish people, ready to blame each other at the first opportunity. Octavia began to cry, and Fletcher sat with his head down, clearly wanting to fall through the earth. I felt sorry for my grandchildren. It wasn't their fault their parents had raised them like that. Enough! My voice, suddenly firm and loud, silenced them all. I can see right through you. You don't care about my well-being, you only care about money. Well, now you know there won't be any, ever. You'll regret this, Tabitha said through gritted teeth. We'll contest the will. Prove you're out of your mind. You can try, I smiled. My lawyer had thought of everything. There's a clause in the will that anyone who tries to contest it is automatically disqualified from any inheritance, even if the court sides with them. In addition, I've had an independent medical examination confirming my full capacity. All the paperwork is in order. Tabitha was choking on her anger. You old bitch. Garth finished for her, looking at me with hatred. That's what you are. Always have been. Controlling, manipulative, demanding. Dad put up with you out of pity. He told me he regretted his marriage. It was a low blow and Garth knew it. He was trying to hurt me in my heart by tarnishing the memory of my marriage. But I was ready. Your father would never say such a thing, Garth. He loved me to the last day of his life, and I loved him. Our marriage was a happy one. The only thing we both regretted was how different you were when you met Tabitha. How you let her destroy our family. Don't you dare blame me, Tabitha shrieked. You're the one who's always prying into our lives, always trying to tell us what to do. I just wanted to be a part of your life, I said calmly. To be a grandmother to my grandchildren. But you made that impossible. And now we're all reaping the rewards. Let's go. Garth grabbed Tabitha's hand. We're leaving. Kids in the car. Octavia, still crying, got up and headed for the door. Fletcher followed her, but halfway out he stopped and turned around. Grandma? His voice sounded uncertain. Yeah, I wasn't laughing at you, Mom said it was the right thing to do. Fletcher! Garth yelled. Get in the car! Now! The boy gave me one last look and walked out. I heard the front door slam, then the sound of the engine starting. They drove off. Dorothy and I were left sitting at the table, surrounded by our uneaten dinner and a heavy silence. What a show, Dorothy said at last, pouring herself some wine. They showed their true colors, didn't they? Yes, I nodded, feeling a strange emptiness inside. Completely. Are you all right? Dorothy looked at me carefully. Your son said some terrible things. I know Frank never said those things to him. I shook my head. Garth just wanted to hurt me. And he succeeded, but not as much as he'd hoped. We sat in silence for a while, then started clearing the table. The work helped me not to think, not to analyze what had happened. But when the last plate was washed and put away, I sank into a chair and covered my face with my hands. I've lost them, Dorothy, I whispered. I've lost them completely. They lost themselves, Merle. Dorothy put her arm around my shoulders. You did what you had to do. You stood up for your dignity. Should I have? I looked up at her. Maybe I should have just kept my mouth shut, kept the appearance of family, and let them keep treating you like you were nothing? Dorothy shook her head. No, Merle. You did the right thing. Cruel, perhaps, but fair. They deserve this lesson. I hope it does them good, I sighed. I doubt it. Don't think about them. Dorothy stroked my arm. Think about our new house in Santa Barbara, about walking on the beach, drinking wine at sunset, meeting new people. Your life is just beginning, Merle. And it's going to be a good life. I nodded, trying to believe her words. A new life. Without the weight of unreasonable expectations, without the pain of neglect, without humiliation. A life I had chosen for myself. Dorothy stayed the night at my house. We sat in the living room for a long time, reminiscing about the past, talking about the future, sipping wine and listening to old records by Frank Sinatra, my husband's favorite singer. You know, Dorothy said before we retired to our bedrooms, Frank would have been proud of you tonight. You think so? I doubted it. He was always so kind, so forgiving. Kind, yes, Dorothy agreed, but not weak, and he would never let anyone, not even his own son, treat his wife like that. He'd be proud of you for standing up for yourself at last. With those words, she kissed me on the cheek and left for the guest bedroom. I sat in the chair for a long time looking at Frank's picture on the mantelpiece. Perhaps Dorothy was right. Perhaps he really would be proud of me. I didn't know if I would ever see Garth and his family again. I didn't know if we could ever regain even a semblance of a relationship. But for the first time in a long time, I felt free from the weight of unfulfilled hopes and continuous disappointment. I went up to my bedroom, got into bed, and for the first time in many nights fell asleep quickly and peacefully, without tears or regrets. Tomorrow would be a new day, the beginning of my new life. The next morning, after the memorable dinner, I woke up with a sense of lightness I hadn't felt in years. It was as if the heavy weight weighing on my shoulders had suddenly disappeared. The sun was shining warmly on the bedroom, promising a good day. Over breakfast, Dorothy and I discussed plans for the next few weeks, getting ready to move, selling things we didn't need, saying goodbye to Lakewood. I decided to take only the essentials with me, a few boxes of books, photographs, favorite souvenirs, and a small piece of furniture. The rest I planned to either sell or give away. Do you think they'll call? Dorothy asked, spreading jam on her toast. Garth? Maybe, I shrugged. But not right away. First they'll be angry. Then they'll think of ways to win my affection back. For money, of course, not for me. What about you? Would you pick up the phone if he called? I thought about it. My anger and resentment hadn't disappeared, but they weren't burning, sharp anymore. More like a quiet sadness for what could have been, but wasn't. I'll take it, I finally said. But it won't change anything. My decision is final. Dorothy nodded understandingly and changed the subject. I talked to my sister yesterday. She's thrilled that we're moving to Santa Barbara. She says the local climate does wonders for arthritis. We laughed and the day went on. Calls, plans, lists. I was so busy that I hardly thought about yesterday until the phone rang in the evening. Garth's name popped up on the phone screen. I took a deep breath and answered, "Hello, Garth." "Mom." His voice sounded strained. "We need to talk. What happened yesterday? It was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I raised an eyebrow, even though he couldn't see it. "I thought it was pretty clear. Tabitha and I overreacted, said things we didn't mean. You were upset too. Let's get together and talk about it." "Garth." I tried to speak softly but firmly. I wasn't upset. I was completely calm and aware. Everything I said yesterday was true. I sold the property, changed my will, and I'm moving to Santa Barbara. It's a done deal. "But Mom," he said with a pleading tone in his voice, "it's Daddy's inheritance. He wanted it to stay in the family." "Your father wanted his family to be close-knit and caring, his wife to be respected, his grandchildren to know their grandmother. None of those things happened." "We can fix this," Garth insisted. "Give us a chance." "A chance for what, Garth?" I sighed. "To pretend to be a loving family until I die and then take the inheritance? No, thank you. I value my life more highly." A pause followed. When Garth spoke again, his voice had changed, colder, more calculating. "I talked to the lawyer. He thinks we can challenge your new will, prove that you acted under the influence of strong emotion, or even someone else's. This friend of yours, Dorothy." "Are you threatening me with a lawsuit?" I couldn't believe my ears. "Your own mother?" "I'm protecting my family's interests," he countered. "My children, it's their inheritance." "Their inheritance," I said slowly, "is the values you and Tabitha have instilled in them: greed, disrespect for their elders, a belief that money is more important than relationships. Congratulations, Garth. This is truly a valuable inheritance." "You're going to regret this," he gritted through his teeth. "We'll make you change your mind." "Goodbye, Garth." I hung up, my hands shaking. The calls continued over the next few days, from Garth, from Tabitha, even from Octavia, who I suspected was acting on orders from her parents. I answered politely, but firmly refused to meet or talk about the inheritance. Their tactics changed from threats to pleas, from accusations to apologies, but the bottom line remained the same. They wanted money, not a relationship. 2 weeks later, when I was actively packing to move, Tabitha showed up on my doorstep, impeccably dressed, a look of remorse on her face, and a bouquet of flowers in her hands. "Merle," she stepped forward, holding out the bouquet. "I've come to apologize, in person, without Garth." I accepted the flowers but didn't invite her in. "Thank you, Tabitha, but it won't change anything." "Please," she practically begged, "at least hear me out." I sighed and stepped aside, letting her into the house. We walked into the living room, where there were boxes of books and things everywhere. "You're really leaving," she stated, looking around. "Yes, in 10 days, I nodded. "What did you want to tell me, Tabitha?" She sat on the edge of the couch, her hands folded in her lap. "I realized that Garth and I haven't been acting right, especially me. I never appreciated you, never respected you. Been busy with my career, my kids, my parents." She paused. "But I want to make it right. I want my children to know their grandmother, so we can have a real family." Her words sounded sincere, but her eyes betrayed it, cold, calculating. I knew that Garth was behind this visit, that they had a strategy Tabitha had to play on my maternal feelings, to make me feel sorry for him, to make me change my mind. "Tabitha," I said softly but firmly, "I appreciate your visit and your words, but I'm afraid it's too late for such a change. I'm moving to Santa Barbara, starting a new life. You can visit me there if you'd like. But my decision about my inheritance still stands." Her face changed instantly, the mask of remorse falling away, giving way to cold fury. "You're a selfish old woman. You think only of yourself. What about the children? What about their future?" "Their future depends on you and Garth," I said calmly, "on the values you instill in them. the education you give them, on the love you give them, not from the money they might get after I'm dead. Hypocrite, Tabitha stood up, clenching her fists. You've always been like this. Garth is right. His father regretted marrying you. Goodbye, Tabitha. I stood up too and headed for the door. Say hello to the kids. After she left, I stood at the window for a long time, staring out at the street. Part of me still hoped they would understand, realize, change. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't happen. They were too consumed with greed, too used to seeing me only as a source of potential inheritance. The days leading up to the move flew by in a flurry of activity selling things I didn't need, saying goodbye to neighbors, seeing the few friends left in Lakewood for the last time. Garth and Tabitha kept calling, but less and less frequently. Apparently, they were beginning to realize they weren't getting anywhere. The day I left, I walked around the house one last time, saying goodbye to every room, every corner that held memories of happy years with Frank, of Garth's childhood. It was sad to leave a place that had been home for decades, but I didn't doubt my decision. Goodbye, Frank, I whispered, standing in our bedroom. I loved you here, and I will love you wherever I go. Dorothy was waiting for me in the car. The truck with our belongings had already left the day before. We planned to stop at motels along the way, taking our time, enjoying the road and the freedom. You ready? Dorothy asked as I got into the passenger seat. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied, looking at the house one last time. The new house in Santa Barbara exceeded my expectations, a small but cozy one-story cottage with a terrace garden and mountain views. Just a 10-minute walk from the ocean, and 2 blocks from the home of Dorothy's sister Eleanor, a cheerful woman of 75 who took us under her wing from day one. Welcome to paradise, girls, she exclaimed, welcoming us to our new home with a bottle of champagne. Here you will be 20 years younger. The first weeks in the new city were full of discoveries. We explored the neighborhood, got to know our neighbors, found our favorite cafes and stores. Eleanor introduced us to her friends, mostly energetic retirees like herself. Among them was Gordon Parker, a 72-year-old widower and former professor of literature. Tall, trim, with a neat gray beard and lively eyes, he reminded me of Frank, the same kindness, the same intelligence, the same sense of humor. Did you teach math? He asked the first time we met at Eleanor's barbecue. How interesting! I've always admired mathematicians. You see the world very differently than we humanitarians do. We got to talking and discovered we had a lot in common, a love of classical music, an interest in history, a habit of getting up early and enjoying the quiet of the morning. Gordon lived alone in a small house near us, read a lot, gardened, and occasionally gave lectures at the local library. You must come to my next lecture, he invited me, on the influence of Shakespeare on modern literature. I promise it won't be too boring. I'd love to, I agreed, feeling a blush come to my cheeks. Dorothy, noticing this, then teased me. Wow, Merle. You seem to have made an impression on the professor. Don't be silly, I said. We were just finding common topics of conversation. But the truth was, I liked Gordon. Not as a potential romantic partner, I still felt like Frank's wife, even 10 years after his death. But as a friend, as a conversationalist, as someone who was nice to spend time with. And we began to spend time together, going to concerts in the local park, visiting museums, sometimes just sitting on the terrace of my house, reading books and occasionally exchanging opinions about what we'd read. Garth called less and less often, once a month, sometimes less. The conversations were short, formal. He no longer mentioned the inheritance, apparently having realized the futility of such attempts. Instead, he talked about his work, his children, and sometimes asked how I was doing. I answered politely but briefly. One day, about 6 months after the move, he asked, "Are you happy there, Mom?" The question took me by surprise with its unexpected sincerity. "Yes, Garth," I answered after a pause. "I am happy here." "Then I'm happy for you," he said, and there was no falseness in his voice. Really happy. Maybe something was changing in him. Maybe my absence made him think, but I was under no illusions. Too much water had passed, too deep a fissure had formed between us. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. I found my place in a new city, in a new life. I volunteered at the local library, joined the gardening club, started taking art lessons. I'd always wanted to learn, but never had the time. Dorothy also blossomed in Santa Barbara, losing weight, getting younger, even having a brief affair with a local boat owner, which was the subject of friendly banter among our new friends. "It's never too late to enjoy life," she said, winking. "Especially when you're finally free of the burden of the past." I agreed with her. For the first time in years, I felt free from expectations, from disappointment, from the constant pain of unrecognition. I lived in the present without looking back at the past or fearing the future. And then, almost exactly a year after I moved, a letter arrived from Octavia. Not an electronic one, but a real paper one, in a stamped envelope. I stared at it in surprise, hesitant to open it. "Come on," Dorothy nudged me, who had stopped by for a cup of coffee. "Open it! What could be so scary?" I opened the envelope and began to read. "Dear Grandma, I don't know if you'll read this letter or throw it away when you see who it's from. I wouldn't be surprised if you did. After everything that's happened between you and our family, you have every reason to ignore any attempt at contact. But I have to write to you. I have to tell you that I realize now how horribly we've all treated you. Especially me. I was selfish, rude, ungrateful. I followed my parents' example without thinking about how it hurt you. That birthday, that empty box. I'm ashamed to remember it. I was laughing with everyone, taking pictures of your face on my phone, not thinking about the pain I was causing you. I have no excuse. A lot of things have changed since you left. My parents fight all the time. Dad blames Mom for turning him against you. Mom blames him for not being able to convince you to change your will. They think I can't hear, but the walls in our house are thin. I recently found some old photo albums in the garage, the ones you left behind. There were pictures of your father when he was still a baby, of you and Grandpa young and happy. I'd never seen those pictures before. And in them, my father looks like a completely different man, open, smiling, loving. Not the man I know. What happened to us, Grandma? How did we get like this? I'm graduating from high school this year. I'm going to college in San Diego to study psychology. I want to understand how relationships work, why we hurt the ones we're supposed to love. I don't know if you can ever forgive me. Forgive us all. But I want you to know that I realize now how wrong we were, and I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. If you ever want to get in touch with me, I'd be very happy to. But I understand if you don't want anything to do with our family. Love, your granddaughter, Octavia." I reread the letter several times, feeling tears come to my eyes. Not tears of grief or resentment, tears of relief. Perhaps not all was lost. Perhaps at least one soul in this family is capable of growth and change. "What is it?" Dorothy asked impatiently. I handed her the letter. "Read it yourself." She ran her eyes over the lines quickly, then looked up at me. "Will you answer her?" "Yes," I nodded, "but not right away. I need to think about what to say." The next day, Gordon and I walked along the beach. I told him about Octavia's letter and my mixed feelings. "You know," he said thoughtfully, looking out at the ocean, "forgiveness is an amazing thing. It frees you, not so much to forgive the person you forgive, but to forgive yourself." "Do you think I should forgive them?" I asked. "I think you already have," he smiled. "Otherwise, this letter wouldn't have touched you so deeply. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back to the way things were. You can forgive and still set healthy boundaries." He was right. I did forgive them. Not in one moment, but gradually, day by day, finding the joy and peace in my new life that I had been deprived of for so long. But that didn't mean I was ready to go back to the way things were. A week later, I wrote a reply to Octavia. "Dear Octavia, your letter touched me to the core. Thank you for having the courage to write it. I don't hold a grudge against you. I never have. You were a child who followed the example of adults. Yes, it hurt me, but I realized you didn't realize what you were doing. I'm glad to hear that you went to college, that you chose psychology. It is a noble profession, helping people understand themselves and others. Perhaps your experience, however painful, will be a valuable asset in your future work." What happened to our family? I think about it often. Perhaps we just lost sight of what's really important: caring, respect, unconditional love. We let the little things, the hurts, the misunderstandings come between us. And then those little things grew into a wall that no one could overcome. I've found a new life here in Santa Barbara. I have friends, activities that bring me joy. I have finally learned to appreciate myself, my desires, my boundaries. It's been a long journey, but it's been worth it. I'm not going back to Lakewood, Octavia. And my decision regarding the inheritance stands. But that doesn't mean there can't be relations between us. If that's what you really want, we can start over, on a new basis. No expectations, no commitments. Just two women bound by blood and maybe something more. If you ever want to come to Santa Barbara, my doors are open to you. I would love to show you around this beautiful city and introduce you to my new friends. You can always call me or write me. Whatever happens next, know that I love you. I always have, and I always will. Warmly, your Grandma Merle, Grandma. I sealed the letter, wrote the address, and took it to the post office. I don't know if I'll get a reply, if Octavia will ever come to visit. It doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that I am finally at peace with myself, with my past, with my decisions. When I got home, I went out on the terrace with a cup of tea. The day was clear, warm. I could see the mountains in the distance, and to the right, if I looked closely, I could see a strip of ocean. The roses Gordon and I had planted a month ago were blooming in the garden. Life went on. A new life I'd built on my own, on the ruins of the old one. A life in which I was no longer an empty shell, no longer a shadow, no longer an appendage to other people's expectations. I was Merle Hadley, a 69-year-old woman who had finally learned to appreciate herself, who had found the courage to say no to disrespect and neglect, who started over when many in her shoes would have just accepted it. And I was happy. Really, deeply happy, for the first time in many, many years.